I'm currently in the beautiful country of Uganda, and I want to show you in this video how to make the most out of your photography when doing not only gorilla trekking, but also chimpanzees, telling you the right settings and what gear to bring. Stay tuned, because at the end of the video, I'll show you some of my favorite photographs from the trip. My name is Riddim Steele, and I'm a wildlife photographer for Pangolin Photo Safaris. It's my job to take people like you on photographic safaris throughout Africa and beyond. In this video, I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide on how to make the most out of your photography in this tough environment. I hope you enjoy, and thank you so much for watching. Tomorrow morning, we head out on our first official trek, but before we do so, before I even talk about how to shoot gorillas and chimpanzees, I want to walk you through what lenses I think are best for both gorilla and chimpanzee trekking. So, the standard go-to lens for most treks for both chimpanzees and gorillas is the good 70 to 200mm lens. I've currently got two Canon R6 Mark IIs with me, great for low light, but generally the 70 to 200 is a brilliant lens. 2.8 all the way through, and it helps with the low light conditions that we're going to be dealing with. And I want to emphasize it is low light conditions. A lot of the time we're shooting on a few hundred shutter speed, lowest f number, so this lens works incredibly well. Now, you won't be disappointed if you take this, and I guarantee most of your shots will be taken on this lens. That being said, there are some other options. I've seen people before bringing 100 to 400mm lenses, or even the 200 to 400. Some people swear by. 200 to 400 Canon is an f4 all the way through. As I said with the 70 to 200, you are looking for a lens that shoots on the lower f numbers. So 2.8 really is a good option. There are other lenses like the Sigma ones 20 to 300, 2.8, that's 2.8 all the way through. The only challenge with this lens, it's very bulky, but it does give you that extra bit of reach, and to be honest, I do like that for the portrait shots. For most of the wide stuff, bring a 24 to 70 or 24 to 100. It gives you the opportunity to shoot the environment. And I think sometimes that's missed in gorilla trekking and chimpanzee trekking. We want to see the wider scene. We don't just want to shoot those portraits and close-ups. But yeah, that's what lenses I'm taking with, and I hope that helps you.
Up early to do our first gorilla trek. It's a bit chilly this morning, but as soon as we get going, it's going to warm up quite quickly. But super excited and just can't wait to see them for the first time.
Imagine standing face to face with a majestic mountain gorilla or a cautious chimpanzee in the heart of the rainforest. It's an incredible experience, but capturing these moments on camera can be challenging. In this video, I'll guide you through the best techniques and settings for photographing gorillas and chimpanzees in the wild, so you can return home with stunning images of these remarkable primates. As you know, both gorillas and chimpanzees live in dense forests, often with low light, lots of foliage, and predictably unpredictable weather. This means that even the best lighting conditions might be less than ideal for photography. Don't worry though, by understanding your surroundings and adapting your camera settings, you can still capture fantastic images. The biggest challenge here is the lack of direct light. The forest canopy blocks sunlight, creating shaded areas or harsh light from the canopies. You'll often be shooting in dim lighting, so you need to adjust your camera settings to make the most of the available light. Let's talk about camera settings. I nearly always shoot in manual mode with auto ISO. The benefit of this is that I have full control of the two most important elements, my shutter speed and my aperture, and I let my camera adapt the ISO for the constant changing light. While full manual, shutter priority, or aperture priority modes are also fine, I personally prefer this setup in these conditions. While gorillas are often more relaxed, chimpanzees can be fast and unpredictable, meaning in an ideal world with lots of light, you would want a relatively fast shutter speed. But due to lighting conditions, I'm very seldomly, if ever, at more than 1/400th of a second. Normally I start with a shutter speed of around 1/250th of a second and adjust up or down as necessary. If the light allows, go faster to avoid motion blur, especially if the animals are moving. Even at such low speeds, there were times my ISO was hitting 20,000 or more. For slower moving gorillas, you might be able to get away with as low as 1/50th of a second with a very steady hand and a stationary subject, but be ready to increase this at any moment. I will add my camera settings on each of my images at the end of the video to help give you an idea of how I shot each scene. I nearly always shoot on my lowest f number, not only for the low light, but this is also key for isolating the subject from its busy environment. Aim for an aperture between its lowest and f4. As mentioned before, a fast lens with a wide maximum aperture, such as f2.8 or even lower, is ideal for these conditions. It allows more light to reach the sensor, improving your chances of sharp shots even in low light. On rare occasions, when I want to show off the details of trees or parts of the surrounding environments, I will increase my f number to as high as f8, but I will then drop my shutter speed to compensate for this. While we have our ISO on auto, I must emphasize the importance of watching what your ISO does in different lighting conditions, and adjusting shutter speed or aperture to stop it getting too high. Keep in mind, the higher your ISO, the more grain you'll introduce into the image. Strike a balance to keep your images sharp without too much noise. Because I'm shooting with auto ISO, I'm adjusting the ISO by changing my exposure compensation. As we have constantly changing lighting between dappled sun and deep shade, I'm using my exposure compensation to darken or lighten my image. In the forest, shadows can easily dominate your frame, so watch for underexposure and adjust accordingly. A common mistake I see photographers make in low light or high ISO situations is they reduce the exposure to bring down the ISO. Grain is mostly found in your shadows, so instead of underexposing in camera and brightening up in post, the reverse will see better results. Two techniques I find work well with both chimpanzees and gorillas is low and high key photography. Low-key photography is a style of photography that emphasizes darker tones, shadows, and minimal lighting to create dramatic, moody, or mysterious images. Underexposing, you create contrast between the light and the shadows, resulting in high contrast and deep black backgrounds. A close-up of a gorilla or chimpanzee's face works perfectly, with details of the face illuminated, highlighting its eyes or facial textures, while the rest fades into the shadow or dark background. This approach works particularly well with gorillas, as it can emphasize their raw power, contemplative expressions, or majestic presence. High-key photography is a style that emphasizes bright lighting to reduce or eliminate shadows. It typically features a well-lit background. This technique is commonly used in portrait or fashion photography, but can also be applied creatively in wildlife photography. For example, when shooting into the canopy, we could overexpose to regain a chimpanzee's features while blowing out the highlights of the sky. If you would like to learn a bit more about low or high key photography, I will link to our tutorial on them below. While photographing gorillas and chimpanzees, I decided to do a fun experiment testing both animal and human eye tracking features on my mirrorless camera to determine which would yield better results. After all, we share enough DNA with chimpanzees. Although the animal eye tracking performs slightly better overall than human eye tracking, I found that in very low light situations, both tracking modes occasionally focused on the primate's ears or noses instead of their eyes. In these conditions, using a single point focus option often provided the most accurate and consistent results. When it comes to composition, the same rules apply in the jungle as they do anywhere else. Rule of thirds, leading lines, and framing your subject. But there's an additional challenge here, and that's the foliage. The dense forest can sometimes obstruct your view of the animal or simply create a very cluttered composition. My two pieces of advice would be: 1. Identify what the distractions may be and either change your angle to reduce the distraction or simply be patient. Wait for the right moment when the animal moves into a clearing, or, something that often happens with gorillas, they may even remove the distraction for you. My second piece of advice would be to embrace the surroundings. Rather than getting frustrated with the foliage, try and use it to frame your subject. I often position in a way to place the foliage in the foreground or background to create beautiful green framed surroundings. One of the most important things to remember is to respect the wildlife and listen to the rangers. While they try and enforce a minimum distance from the subject to avoid spreading diseases or disturbing their natural behavior, there may be times when your subject approaches you. Stay still, listen to the ranger's instructions, but most importantly, don't forget to keep shooting if you're allowed to. Photographing gorillas and chimpanzees in the wild is an unforgettable experience. With the right preparation, settings, and a bit of patience, you'll be able to capture images that reflect their incredible beauty and behavior. But remember, it's not just about the photos. This is a truly breathtaking experience, and when the moment allows, put your camera down and take in where you are. As the rain sets in, sadly our time here in Uganda has come to an end, but what an incredible experience it has been, and a truly once-in-a-lifetime trip. I hope at some stage you can join me here in Uganda, but until then, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.